evening. The meeting for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority Citizen Advisory Committee is now in session. You have your agenda in front of you. Today is Wednesday, January 25th. I'd like to ask if there's any public comment. I have two cards here. One for public comment, and that would be Ralph Hoffman. Please come to the podium, state your name and your address, please.
Good evening. I'm Ralph Hoffman. I own a condo in downtown Walnut Creek. I'm a senior advocate with the County Senior Mobility Action Council, and I'm also a member of the County Spare the Air Resource Team. I do have some breaking news for you. I would urge that you adjourn in memory of Mary Tyler Moore. She passed away suddenly today. She was born in Brooklyn in 1936. I was born in Brooklyn in 1942. And so I ask that you may want to consider adjourning in memory, in her memory. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Tyler Moore. Wasn't that girl on television? No? Oh, Marlo Thomas. Mary Tyler. Dick Van Dyke. Thank you. See what I know? Oh, okay. We have a second public comment, and this is from Pete Bennett. Please come to the podium.
Hi. Good evening. Got a nice microphone. Not always so good. My name's Pete Bennett. I used to be a resident of Danville, and my comments today are going to be a little out of pocket for you, but I'm using the 3-minute rule to share something pretty interesting. You're unaware of it, but my truck exploded on 680. I was almost burned alive. And then a month later, I had a building inspector nearly kill me in my house. Now, why am I saying this here? I rode your bus today. I've had 9 cars destroyed, totaled, or towed away. I know all the officers connected to the CNET scandal. They were in my house. And, I'm going to the hospital because somebody poisoned me with iodine-131. And so the people that were killed in Berkeley, you'll see that they tested for radiation. That's because of my story. Now, you might find all this pretty weird. Why am I saying it here today? Well, many of you are crossover between different cities. I've emailed many of you. There are some names that I saw on the agenda that drove me to come here tonight. And I'm going to take advantage of this 3 minutes to share this across the county. In Danville, they stole my $40,000 coin collection and totaled my car. In Walnut Creek, they tried to run me over and kill me. Police officers. I have been beaten up repeatedly. I was only out in the rain, living in the rain in the elements for 3.5 to 4 years. Now, why am I sharing this with you? Because I want you to go back to your respective cities. One is, I heard Lafayette tonight, and my eyes can't really read that far across. But I'm coming forward because I discovered little things about my story that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. For you as public officials, I knew Mark Kuhn, the one that jumped off the parking structure. I know public officials that have died of spinal meningitis. I've had family die from spinal meningitis, or friends in my family that have died of spinal meningitis. Why am I speaking? Because my voice has been trampled upon. I've gone to the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors. I've written letters. You can look at my email as pete@petebennett.net. And any of you receive my emails, you just search, you'll see it has come to you. You should read what I'm saying. And you can find my Twitter, a lot of my story for your Twitter, which is @PeterC.Bennett. And if you want to find my Facebook account, it's Pete Bennett, Walnut Creek. And then my blogs can be found with PGE Witness. Now, what that hashtag PGE Witness is about tomorrow's trial. I'm the witness that got the guy that you get your money from, Michael Peavy, fired. I wrote the letter after I discovered a video of a guy exiting the explosion with 2 gas cans. I was a software engineer for PG&E. I never got paid. I've been tricked by people in this county for decades. The girl that killed her daughter up in Lakeville was a close friend of mine. Her brother is an inspector at the district attorney's office. Her other brother is part of the pipeline explosion 12 years ago.
Mr. Bennett?
I know, am I out of time?
Yes, thank you so
Well,
much.
I made my point, and thank you for letting me do that. And I'll be back again, and I will be visiting each one of your cities in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuing on with the agenda, our next item is approval of summary actions. And do I have a motion to approve? So I have Mark Roberts of the City of Orinda who has made a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Patricia Bisbal of the City of Contra Costa County is second. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
And any abstentions?
Abstain.
One. Oh, two. Okay, thank you. If you look at general business, would you please check your attendance log? And while you're doing that, would you check your appointment dates for those of you whose appointments are up for 2017? If you want to remain as a representative, I would ask that you contact the city clerk for your particular city, and you can do that. An email is sufficient for them then to notify the board that you will remain. Note the meeting calendar. And please check the roster to ensure that your names and addresses and contact information is accurate. Any changes? Okay, then we'll move on to major discussion. And we start out with reviewing the City of Walnut Creek's calendar years 2014 and 2015, their growth management program compliance checklist. And I believe this is Mr. Ozzie Arce. Is that correct?
Close. Arce.
Arce.
We'll
Okay.
take it.
Okay, Mr. Arce, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having us. I'm Ozzie Arce from the City of Walnut Creek, and this is Andy Smith with the City of Walnut Creek, is also Assistant Planner and Senior Planner. I did draft a one-sheet summary of the checklist items. As you all are aware, there's a lot of items that are covered on the checklist. And, just to be eligible to receive our return to source funds, you all must determine that the jurisdiction is in compliance. And Walnut Creek does believe we are in compliance with the Measure J GMP program. So just some significant projects approved. Moving down this one-page sheet, I split it up between development, housing, and transportation. So projects approved during the reporting period 2014-2015, just some summaries. We have a few shopping centers starting with Encina Grande, renovations, and Whole Foods. And that was an almost 10-acre shopping center, but it did include the addition of 6 freestanding buildings for a total of 102 square feet. Moving on, the Shadelands Gateway Specific Plan, and this was a fairly significant specific plan because it changed some of the land use designations, but it also allowed for the construction of the Orchards project in Walnut Creek, which is another fairly significant project that was approved during this reporting period. So skipping down to the next one, the Orchards, it's a new mixed-use commercial shopping center that has a new Safeway. Across the street is Encina Grande, which is the Whole Foods, just as a FYI, and this does include up to 200 of senior housing as part of that Orchards project, and that came in through the Shadelands Gateway Specific Plan. So while those are sizable projects, the impacts were evaluated, and a planning IR was drafted. And on here I wrote, a traffic study was required and impacts analyzed as part of the Gateway Specific Plan for Shadelands. Moving on, Broadway Plaza. I'm sure you all are familiar with our Broadway Plaza Shopping Center. It's a $500 million renovation project. And lastly, we have these two affordable housing projects, 1515 and 1738 Riviera, and they're 100% affordable. Near those are The Landing, which is a new multifamily project that's across the street from BART, 178 units. I know that project's been going on for a while, but it's picked up speed again. But again, those are just some major projects. In the checklist items, you'll notice there are others that are identified. These are just the most significant. Back page, you'll notice, is the affordable housing section. There was a construction of the Pleasant Creek homes and the 3rd Avenue apartments. And an allocation of $5 billion of acquisition of the 2 parcels for the Riviera Street projects, the 2 that I mentioned in the back page, 1515 and 1738. So there's a $5 million contribution from the city for that. And then we also update our housing element, which you all know is a chapter that must be updated every 8 years as part of the general plan. Because we updated our housing element, there was a requirement to do a general plan amendment since it is a chapter of that. And those details are also a part of the checklist items. And then the adoption of a reasonable accommodation ordinance, but I believe a lot of jurisdictions did that during that reporting period. I think that was a state mandate. Lastly, transportation. We did a little over 9 miles of bikeway facility planning. And just to touch a little bit on that, but I included some pictures on there as well. So there's a lot going on. I figured this one pager would kind of put it all in one page since that checklist doesn't have a lot of attachments. So I appreciate your time, and Andy and I are here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
I've got a question or two. We'll start with one. On your affordable housing, what do you have in place to keep rent from rising too quickly?
I'm sorry, Andy Smith, Senior Planner with the City of Walnut Creek. Are you referring to something along the lines of like a rent stabilization ordinance, things of that nature, for market rate apartments? We are actually exploring some options at this moment. Our housing program is exploring that with our City Council and Planning Commission. We don't have anything on the books as of yet with regard to market rate apartments, although we do have a fairly robust affordable housing program.
I do have a public comment from a person in the audience who wants to talk about this. So, Mr. Hoffman, if you would come to the podium.
As a resident of Walnut Creek, I would just like to say I believe that Walnut Creek is in compliance with the plans also. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the committee? Roxanne?
A little behind schedule on the card. I'll get it to you in a second. It's right there.
Housing element that requires a general plan amendment and an addendum to the environmental impact report. Where are you in that process?
That was completed in 2015, I want to say.
So
Completed and adopted.
yeah, so it was HCD certified it in 2014, September.
So this is kind of okay. Worded into it.
We maybe.
It sounds as though it's still in the process.
Oh, I apologize for that, yes. The intent is to document some of the highlights of the work that was done during the reporting period. And apologize if we gave the indication otherwise.
Yeah, so yeah.
I have a request for a public comment from Mr. Pete Bennett, if you'd come to the podium.
Okay, thank you for letting me speak earlier. I used to write mortgage-backed securities for big banks. So when I like the affordability stuff, okay? But I have a 40 or 50-year window of how this stuff has been put together for decades. And I have not, and I brought this up at other meetings, the source of funds and the ownership of the buildings and the structure over the long term. I'll give you an example where the city of Concord gave away a lot of money. The B of A complex that was built years ago was given a special program. I actually tried to buy some of the land under there in 1981. So What I know from experience is that you really need to know the lender, the source of funds, and the box around it, so you don't get burned 20 years from now because you gave away something. So that's all I'm saying. I don't know if my statements fit exactly with what they said, but I'm picking through this stuff and trying to catch up with what they're saying. But I definitely want to get my 2 cents in on that because, and I'll just give you an example. I've been studying fires because of my own personal situation, and I spotted something about the ghost fire that I know that you don't know about. And I'm concerned that they're doing gentrification and real estate changes by brute force. And I will email you that, and as you get to know my story that's getting more organized, very important as you carve out. An example of what I know is I know a gal that used to own a house right over there. She's now homeless, and the eminent domain took her property. That's what eminent domain does. You have something, somebody takes it, you build another castle, and then there's losers. Let's not have losers. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from committee members?
Yeah, one more. Do you guys have a traffic engineer, and are you doing flow studies on your intersections? If so, all of them? How many? And what are the expected improvements?
We do have a traffic engineer. Unfortunately, he's not here with us tonight. And I'll be honest with you, I'm unable to answer the second part of your question, but I'd be happy to follow up with that later.
Thank you.
Mark, you had a question?
Ozzie and Andy, I know there are some longtime Walnut Creek residents who lament the changing character and the growth of your city. But from my perspective, I continue to be impressed by how well balanced Walnut Creek growth has been. I mean, in terms of commercial, residential, retail, I think it has really demonstrated very careful thought and consideration to all of the needs of the community, and it has really truly become a regional hub. And I think just from my perspective, I know yes, some people don't like the growth, the traffic, you can't find a parking space in front of where you want to be, but I think overall Walnut Creek has done a superb job in its growth over the past several decades. I just want to compliment you on the job that you've done to help make that happen.
Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to share that with our city council as well.
Other comments or questions? Okay, so typically what we do is we ask the representative for the city to make a motion to accept and move this on to the Transportation Planning Commission. But that person is not here today, they're not present today. So I'd like to entertain a motion from our group. Mark? So Mark has made a motion to accept.
I'll second.
Who seconds? Okay, so Larry has seconded. And so all those in favor to move this on to the Planning Committee, Transportation Planning Committee, please motion by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so what will happen now is that on February 1st, the authorities planning will review this, so I urge you to be present for that. And then from there, it will move on to the authority, and that would be February 15th. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
For completing this, too. The next item on our agenda is the Town of Danville's calendar year 2014-2015 Growth Management Program Compliant Checklist. And we have Mr. Valdez. Am I pronouncing that right? I'm so far I'm batting zero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to introduce Kevin Gailey, our Chief of Planning, and my name is Andy Dillard. I'm the Transportation Manager with the town.
Okay, thank you. So we'll let you give us a summary, please.
Thank you. So thanks for having us this evening. We're pleased to present our checklist for calendar years 14 and 15. We feel as well that our checklist is in compliance again this time. As always, Danville was proud to serve on several regional transportation planning committees, which you're all familiar with, including the Southwest Area Transportation Committee, Tri-Valley Transportation Council, CCTA's Technical Coordinating Committee, CCTA's Countywide Bike and Ped Advisory Committee. We also served our electeds and staff on the I-680 Transit Investment Congestion Relief Study. That was an extensive effort. The town also, as I mentioned before, we actively participate with the Tri-Valley Transportation Council, and during that time, we've been working extensively on an update of our strategic expenditure plan, and concurrently, we also worked quite a bit on the proposal for adoption for our 2015 Tri-Valley Transportation Action Plan and routes of regional significance. Specifically regarding projects in Measure J, since I'm on the traffic transportation side of things, there's a few projects and programs that I'd like to highlight for the reporting period. One is the Measure J funded traffic's student transportation program. It's a congestion relief program, and it continues to be very, very successful. It serves 11 schools throughout the San Ramon Valley, including 5 in Danville. Currently, we have 22 buses. We did add a bus during the reporting period. And it currently serves 1,700 students. It's a very, very effective program. We have a few metrics that are very interesting that you might like to know. On average, the traffics program reduces about 5,000 miles of travel for private vehicles to and from schools, which equates to nearly 1 million vehicle miles per year throughout the San Ramon Valley. So we're very proud of that, and we're thankful for Measure J to help largely fund that program. A couple of other projects on the transportation side before I hand it over to Mr. Gailey here for any housing questions. We initiated or completed a couple of major projects in our downtown that we're very proud of, that were also funded with Measure J, which includes our Harts Avenue beautification project, as well as our Railroad Avenue improvements project. Those had several very key elements that we've been looking forward to doing for a long time, including sidewalk improvements, utility undergrounding, and curb bulb outs, decorative crosswalks, flashing crosswalks, those types of features, and turned out to be very good projects that we're proud of. Also, we, during the reporting period, another project, not as big, but definitely notable, is we installed our first electric vehicle charging stations throughout our downtown. We have 5 currently, and we now have 10 for our fleet for town employees in our service vehicles, so we're very proud of that as well. So at this time, I can turn it over to Mr. Gailey for any housing updates and highlights.
Good evening. This is about an every 2-year process for me. The one thing I'll notice that the commute up here is getting worse. So I stayed off the freeway the whole way and got here with about 90 seconds to spare. So I'm glad to be here. It's always interesting to look at a 2-year snapshot of what we've been doing with housing, especially when you're usually looking back a year and a half back. So it's kind of like, well, what happened when? So I've passed on some narrative and a couple tables. Table A is a summary of actual production for the 2-year period. I think the noteworthy thing is coming out of the end of the prior year, having updated our general plan, we took on, from a housing point of view, probably the most significant task, and that was addressing the fact that in our 2007-2014 housing element, we had identified that we had what's called a RHNA shortfall. We had regional housing needs allocation shortfall. So breaking down our housing assignment for that time frame, the low-income component would necessitate a certain minimum amount of acreage with multifamily designation at a minimum of 20 units an acre, and we were about 2 acres short. And the very low, extremely low, backed into a need for a minimum amount of acreage with a minimum development density of 25 units an acre, and we were about 8 acres short. So through our general plan update, the EIR that accompanied that, we actually looked at about 25 acres that would have qualified for one or the other of those two categories. Our intent going in was that it's tough going through a general plan update, it's tough going through an EIR. So if we could get ahead of the game a little, it would have been nice. The EIR provided program level review for those sites. Our planning commission recommended that the council take action on those sites. At the end of the day, unfortunately, we became the recipient of about 30 years, it seemed like 30 years, about 30 hours over the course of about 5 nights with our town council being subjected to the anti-regional government voice that was objecting to the one Bay Area, the ABAG plan. At the end of the day, our council chose to not get ahead of the game on the redesignation of multifamily, but meet the current required need. So we redesignated 2 sites. Somewhat ironically, last night was the public hearing for one of those sites. So one of the sites is right downtown. It's just under 4 acres. Was redesignated to to multifamily residential high, 25 minimum, 30 maximum. The project is a for-rent project invoking density bonus. So it's actually largely a 3-story project at 40, just slightly over 40 units an acre. And while it didn't get passed last night by our planning commission, it's all but done. Again, somewhat ironically, the hiccup was our commission wanted some additional information on traffic. So we'll have to cobble that together and figure out whether we can put a signal in sooner rather than later along Diable Road.
Question?
Yes.
Where is that parcel in Danville? Just curious.
It's right. It's at the corner of what would be Diable Road and 680. So the southbound on-ramp off of Diable Road runs up the east side of the property. There's Heritage Bank right on Diablo. There's the Cabrita property, and there's an office project built in late 70s, early 80s that is about half occupied, and it'll be torn down for this multifamily use. So with that general plan change into the period we're talking about as a requisite step because we had identified that we had a RENA shortfall, we were obligated to rezone those sites. So we initiated the rezoning, got through the rezoning. And that set us up to get into the 2014-2022 housing element cycle and summarize it by saying, we were able to get that in with the early expedited review. So we met the 5-pronged test to have consideration of getting it in at a certain time and doing certain things set forth by the state so that our housing element for that cycle is for the whole 8 years. So we're basically good for 2014 to 2022. Several of the things that we did to be in a position to have that longer period of time and expedited review tied back to zoning text amendments to update some of our zoning texts that back into issues with housing. So our single-family ordinance, our multifamily ordinance have to address transitional housing, sites where by right you could locate homeless shelters. So that's Area 3 in our downtown area. There's about 30 acres that is now a by right use that could be requested. Transitional housing, I think I mentioned. So we basically had about 7 zoning text amendments tying back to things we had set forth that we would do in the prior housing element and things that we had to do to qualify for an expedited review of our 2014-2022 housing element. So all those things were accomplished. And very happy, as always. I think I've done either 3 or 4 housing elements, but now that this one goes to 2022, I don't think I'll do the next one. I think I won't be around. Maybe they'll hire me back as a consultant, but 3 is enough. So, but very happy to get that letter from HCD saying congratulations, you meet the intent and requirements of state housing law, and your housing element's been certified. So if you have any questions on what I've spoke about here or any material I provided you, I'd be happy to take a stab at answering those.
Can we have first question, Mike?
Yeah, this kind of goes for both of you. Are you aware that as of January 1st, 2017, the new building codes that require for high-density housing and commercial projects that electric vehicle charging stations have to be installed in that project based on the number of parking spaces, as well as single-family units have to have 240, 280 hookup availability?
I wasn't personally aware of that. I actually I've been at Danville for 28 years. 13 of those years I was by assignment, but not by experience, the building official. So I'm pretty familiar with our building function, and we're currently using a contract building official. So again, somewhat ironically, one of the questions last night in the public hearing for this 150 apartment unit project, one of our commissioners asked the architect was whether there was an attempt to put chargers in the garage, and I think my recollection is he said yes, because for one, we should do it, and for two, we're going to be required to do it.
Just for a point of information, just to advise the committee that the representative for the City of Antioch is now present. Other questions and comments? Dennis?
I'm not following the local street and road improvement funds reporting form. As an example, it shows here in 13-14 that you received $127,211, and then in 14-15 you got $1,365,581. That seems like a pretty big jump. Is there a digit missing somewhere in here, or? Also, it looks like there's an awful lot of the funds not being expended and being carried over from year to year. So,
I can attempt to explain that. So it depends on when we actually receive the funds. That's how our finance department reports it. It's when we actually are in receipt of those funds. So depending on when we took the checklist the last time around determines when we've received the funds.
so it would be safer. Excuse me. It would be safer to assume that what you received in 14-15 plus 13-14, I should average the two, that total over 2 years. Does that make more sense? Yeah, the tenfold increase is a little hard to understand.
Right. That would be correct to assume.
Okay.
Yeah.
It
So. On
does-
average, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
On average, our return to source is in the neighborhood of between $600,000 to $700,000. So.
That looks about right. Okay, thank you.
I do have a card for public comment from Mr. Pete Bennett. If you will take the microphone, please.
Greetings. My name's Pete Bennett. I'm a former resident of Danville. I have a lot of experience with the town of Danville, and I'm going to bring a credibility issue to the table that I think you should examine. In 2004, I was nearly beat to death by Danville Building Inspector Gary Collins. I haven't told you another part of my story because it's all connected, and there's a credibility issue on the table. That was in September 21st, 2004. A month before that, visible from the town of Danville and the employees that are writing all these reports, they could see my truck explode. Now, I raise this as an objection because I've had a lot of dealings with them. They beat up my attorney. They burned down my attorney's office down the street, murdered my attorney's son on Highway 24, and killed my other attorneys in the jail. I find the town of Danville, with my story, completely disingenuous, to the point where the only reason I'm standing here today, barely homeless, going in for cancer tests, is I've been targeted repeatedly from the events of 2004. I had a building inspector in my house. That's pretty ridiculous. Recorded by 911. 2 years ago, 5 of my family members that are Mormon were murdered in Salt Lake City. I raise these objections because all of my story, the compendium of the issues I bring forward, I know Commander Welsh, if the Antioch's in the room today. I know a lot of people, and I went through hell. I look at the paperwork, and they're all professional engineers, but they didn't do anything to defend me. So the credibility of their documents is slim. I know Danville, because my friends of the Howard brothers, that their house was burned down, and they were attacked by a police dog, and they almost got killed by a police dog, and then they took all their property. They took all my property. They took my family. My sons have been kidnapped. And 2 weeks after I had a discussion with somebody, my car was totaled in Lafayette. And I still don't have a police report for any of this for 30 years. That's why I raised my objections, and that's why I'm going to stand up at meeting after meeting until people in the district attorney's office are indicted. And public officials that failed to do the job they did should be either fired, terminated, removed from office, demoted, whatever it takes. Because the widow was Renee Collins that worked in the town of Danville, and everybody knows her. And I got a bucket full of widows in my story.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Bennett. Other comments or questions? So we happen to have the representative for the city of Danville here, and so I will welcome his motion to either accept or not.
I move we accept.
So I have from the city of Danville, and then, sorry, the town of Danville. Yikes. Not a good night for me right so far. The town of Danville, and then I just went blank.
Brentwood.
And from the, are you a town or a city?
Or city.
Oh, okay. Just checking. And the city, you are. You guys are like speeding right along. And the city of Brentwood has second. So all those in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, please note by saying nay. And any abstentions? Then it's carried. And you have the timetable for the next, and I know you'll be there. Thank you very much. Good seeing you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the City of Lafayette. And we're going to be reviewing the City of Lafayette's calendar year 2014-2015 Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist. And representing, is it Mr. Hickman? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. This report tonight is to present to you some highlights on the calendar year 2014 and 15 actions and programs and projects by the City of Lafayette to satisfy the growth management checklist presented to you. And as a matter of some highlights, I will start with some of the transportation-related activities that have occurred in the City of Lafayette. One of which was the beginning of a downtown congestion reduction plan, which is an ongoing effort and has received funding from Measure J, and also some infrastructure-related projects that are nearing completion, including a roundabout and new traffic signals on Olympic Boulevard and Relief Station Road in the southern portion of the city. As you may know, Pleasant Hill Road, which connects to these projects, is a route of regional significance, so we consider these projects to be significant in that respect for the city and for the region as a whole. Also, other projects that have been undertaken include placement of additional bicycle racks around downtown Lafayette, and there were also some transportation demand management measures that were implemented, including a new carpool program during this reporting period at the Acalanes High School. which is also adjacent to the Pleasant Hill Road route of regional significance. And we have also successfully implemented a bicycle and education program at the grade level in the middle school in Lafayette, in which we have some assemblies and bike rodeos to encourage the younger population to take up walking and biking actively throughout the city. And there have also been some signal optimization projects that have improved not only travel time but also safety throughout the city as well. And then on the land use side, there have been some significant projects undertaken, either begun to be reviewed or completed during the reporting period. One of the more significant developments that was completed its review was the homes at Deer Hill, which as of now is proposed to be a 44-unit new subdivision adjacent to the Pleasant Hill Road and Deer Hill Road intersection on the hillside above State Route 24. There was also some mixed-use development that underwent review and will be adding substantial housing stock relative to the existing stock in the city of Lafayette, one of which is the KB Townhomes Phase 3, which is directly adjacent to the BART station in downtown Lafayette. So it truly will be a transit-oriented development, 72 new units, 7 of which are affordable. And more recently, it was undergoing review during the reporting period, but just passed approval is Lennar Homes mixed-use development within a half mile of the BART station that will add 66 new units, including 15% affordable, which is 10 units within that. Yes, the former Mexican restaurant Celia's 3 parcels that will be consolidated at that location. And just to add some flavor to that one, there will also be some multimodal improvements, including a pathway along the East Bay Mud Aqueduct that will link up to an existing improved section closer to the Lafayette Reservoir. There was also a housing element update as part of the reporting period for the State Housing and Community Development. And the goals, policies, and implementation programs were updated, including new data to reflect the ongoing progress to develop more housing in the city, including also, and then there was an additional housing element amendment to certify the EIR for the new subdivision at the homes at Deer Hill, which I referred to earlier. So certainly I'm available for any questions you may have, and hope that you find this checklist satisfactory.
So I want to thank you for that checklist. You provided me with matrix, and I found it a lot easier to read than just verbiage. So I appreciate that. And also, I had to smile when I saw the attachment for the Circulation Commission that you placed in there. I appreciated that, because the Circulation Commission does have a large say as to building, and they work very closely with the Planning Commission as to what gets built, and to pay close attention to how that traffic mitigation is impacted with it. So thank you. That roundabout, by the way, is personally, I love it. And interesting, I think that maybe half the people really know how to utilize it. So it's interesting to go through there and see how people sort of figure out how to get through. You might want to have, as I think you had in the beginning, the contractors out there sort of moving people along so that there wasn't this congestion. Questions, comments from the committee?
Just getting back to the homes on Deer Hill, I know that Lafayette kind of finds itself in a Scylla and Charybdis position where you have some residents who are opposing even the creation of the 44 homes, and you have that renters coalition that is trying to force the original plan, which I think was going to be about 230 apartment units on that property. Where, if you can just let me know where things are in terms of the legal proceedings on that challenging situation.
The extent of my knowledge is that so what you're referring to are two separate lawsuits coming, I guess, from different angles. One was to basically deny the project outright. One was to preserve the original proposed project, which was to have in excess of 200 multifamily units at that location. The first, which was to a slew of residents filed a lawsuit to deny the project outright. That had been struck down. I don't know what level of court. I believe it was an appellate court, but it may have been a district court. Either way, as far as I know, that lawsuit is basically null at this point. The other one from the Renters Federation is still active. I don't yet know the status of the proceedings, other than the city manager and the city attorney, as well as the city council, are monitoring it. It's certainly still active, to be succinct.
Other I have a speaker's card for public comment. Mr. Pete Bennett.
Greetings. My name's Pete Bennett. Once again, I'm going to speak about another incident in another city that supports what I said earlier. You're all aware of the TIMS database. Stands for Traffic Information Management System at berkeley.edu. And the TIMS database is missing some records in multiple cities. One of them is my hit and run in Danville. One of them's a hit and run on 680. A couple of attempted murders by vehicle, Lafayette. I would welcome the transportation expert to produce the police report and the record of my car being totaled at the intersection of Deer Hill Road and Bart on, I think it's 2nd Street. Because my car was pushed into oncoming traffic, and I was hit with a laser. I got cancer coming in over here because of contamination. And I got hit in the eye, and it damaged my eye, and I'm losing my vision in my right eye. So here I stand again in front of all these people, and I'm going to hold everyone accountable, and I'm going to make you all know what I've gone through. And I'm going to show you how you've been deceived in some respects and how they've been deceived. Because the police and the agencies around that you're relying on their data should be empirical, and it's not. It's flawed, deeply flawed. And those flaws end up creating false reports. It's like a balloon. They just squeeze the sponge or the balloon and make it malleable enough that they turn it into what they want. And what I found out was what's missing is what you don't know. There's a lot more people in this story than you realize. I uncovered a lot. I spent 5 years. And just to give you an analogy how large my story is, the only reason that my mom and dad met was because Barbara Bush's father introduced them. My story is almost 75 years old. There's a lot going on around me. My grandfather was connected to the Kennedy administration. That's how long I think this really truly is. And I've lost probably 30 or 40 million. I'm not kidding. It's been stolen from me. The city of town of Danville has my legal documents that my trust was stolen, connected to the relatives murdered in Salt Lake City. I am putting this on record. And if you have a TIMS database, you go to Chief Christensen and you see if you can dig up that police report where I almost got killed, because I'd like to see it. And I've sent letters to your city multiple times. Ms. Robbins has all copies. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions for Lafayette City Planner? Well, the representative for the city of Lafayette happens to be here. And so I would like to make a motion. I know it's the city of Lafayette. I'm sure on this one. I'd like to make a motion to accept the City of Lafayette's Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist and to move it forward. And I have a second from Dennis. And all those in favor, please note by stating aye.
Aye.
And those opposed by nay. And any abstentions. So it's carried. So you will be then going forward then on February 1st. You'll be meeting there. I urge you to be present at the meeting. You will be getting questions from the planning people there. And good luck. You're new to the city, aren't you?
Yes, 1.5 years in February.
Yeah. Good. So tell the people on the Circulation Commission that I said hello. I used to chair that commission.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So next on the agenda is committee reports. And Stephen?
Yeah, there's a single double-sided page report covering 4 board meetings. If you don't have one, there should be copies on the table by the door. I'll just cover a couple of the highlights. The pace of things has dropped dramatically after the election, after so much work that was gone into to come up with the countywide transportation expenditure plan. Unfortunately, I believe they fell short by about 4 percentage points of achieving the 2/3 majority. So the net effect is governing law, et cetera, remains, for us, remains Measure J. So all of the improvements and changes, including the change in the nature of this committee, won't happen, at least for now. They may try again in 2018. The only really major contract that I see was that we finally, in October, approved the construction contract for the State Route 4 Balfour Road interchange in Brentwood, which is something we have been waiting for. This will be phase 1, a single bridge. And in general, the funding pace of projects is probably going to drop considerably. We certainly won't be doing much more new in our self-help category. The reason we brought forward the transportation expenditure plan and tried to go for this early extension was that we pretty well built out with the money that for Measure C and Measure J. The other item that is a thread running through several of the meetings is the work on the Plan Bay Area 2040 and the One Bay Area grant project screening. So there's been work on developing that, the screening and selection criteria. There's been some further progress on the Connected Vehicle Autonomous Vehicle Program. And in fact, the January meeting set a new record for brevity because the only real item of business off the consent calendar was to be a presentation by people from Sacramento, and they gave up trying to get here in the storm.
Thank you. Other reports from committee members? Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to dovetail off of Stephen's report concerning electric vehicles and transportation. I've been keeping an eye on how this is developing, and the move towards the electrification of California is moving ahead rapidly. The Gomentum Station work is considered one of the largest autonomous vehicle research centers in the country. NRG, EVgo, and a bunch of others have contracted with the California Energy Commission and automakers to build an electric vehicle charging infrastructure through many of the interstates. And the first one they're working on is Interstate 80. There should be fast charging units and level 2 charging units, about one every 25 miles or so between Tahoe and Monterey on the Interstate 80 corridor. Then they're going to be working on the I-5 corridor and the 99 corridor. So range anxiety is going away. On the research end of things, excuse me, battery technology that is in the lab is way far ahead. So, and as you know, for example, the new Chevy Bolt has over a 200-mile range. These issues, range issues, are going to be ameliorated very quickly. The trouble is getting it from the lab out to the market. The other one that's developing, surprisingly, is the hydrogen fuel cell technology and the infrastructure for it. There are hydrogen fuel cell buses out there already. There are fuel stations already, and they're building more. When those two technologies, the electric vehicle and the hydrogen fuel cell technology, mature, it will be a whole new world of transportation. And it'll be at a point where, and maybe even in our lifetimes, where our kids won't need a driver's license. We won't have garages. And we'll have an iPhone app that we'll tap, and a car will come pick us up and take us where we need to go, either by a group or an individual car. And we will go shopping, and we will have assistance moving things in and out. So the new, I guess you would call it future shock, like television was, or the telephone, or the car, this is the next step. And we're headed there very fast in the state of California. And we don't give a damn about Trump.
I have a comment along that too. So thank you, Mike. One thing we've requested, you mentioned Gomentum Station, and I know we've requested it in the past, but I understand it's now, the issues for preventing a field trip are now resolved. So I'm wondering if we might request a field trip to Gomentum Station, number one. And then number two, also if we could get kind of an update on the 680 Express Corridor at a future meeting and what's happening with that too, that would be great.
Definitely, we'll add the 680. I just wanted to say on the Gomentum Station staff, including Diane and myself, just got our tour on Tuesday. So yeah, things have opened up enough that they're actually letting staff go out there in groups. So on my mind was next we got to get the CAC out here. So we will be working with the Gomentum Station folks to arrange a daytime trip for you guys. I'm not sure how it'll work, but we'll figure something out. Sorry, that's around the lingo around the office. We love acronyms.
So, Matt, regarding that tour, just for us who are, down the road, I know, just sort of keep our minds around it. That tour would be late morning, early afternoon?
We'd probably have to, it would probably have to be the morning.
Okay, and so then we'd find some kind of a central point so we're not all driving our vehicles there and can probably
I'll be driving my
carpool.
electric vehicle.
Mike, we'll go with Mike then. Okay.
Yeah, it's still a mix of Army, Navy, and City of Concord property. So there are restrictions about getting lots of cars in there. So yeah, we'll come up with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take the new E-BART and the bus.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Other committee members' reports or comments?
I do. And because Measure X, I was looking so forward to Measure X passing so that we could become relevant. Where are we at with actually, I guess what I would want to do is take a look at the actual legislation that says is the reason for our being here. And if there is enough leeway either way to reorganize our group so that we can become relevant and actually have some kind of bite here. Right now, all of the municipalities are in compliance, and it's like this is just a happy sandwich place or burritos today. Although I appreciate that, I would like to have something more to do.
We definitely understand that. Diane and I discussed that a lot. And we are talking we can't change the board could change the bylaws of Measure J should they want to, but we are talking with Randy Iwasaki, our director. He's aware of the limited role. So, that's why we try and give you guys opportunities to see things like Gomentum Station and bring in interesting presentations. But we recognize that, and maybe we can get a presentation on the legislation and any.
Yeah, when I go to give reports to the city council about things, and I try to dress it up a bit, I get a deer in the headlights look from everybody except for Kevin Romick, and so it's.
And I just want to make one comment about how the cities generally do have their checklists approved. What you guys don't see is that we do a lot of work with the cities leading up to the meetings. They submit their checklist. We pour over it with a fine-tooth comb, send it back, say, do this, do this, do this. So if you saw the initial submittal, most cities wouldn't pass. But it's not that they haven't done the work, it's just they haven't submitted the right information. So there is a lot of work behind the scenes to get the cities in compliance, but that's because we don't want to hash it out, some minor details here in a public setting, but I definitely get what you're saying.
Maybe this has been produced and I don't know where it is, but it looks to me like when I look at the sheet of how the funds have been expended from the local transportation program, that some cities use it for compliance checklists, some use it for streets and roads, some use it for TDM. It's all over the place. Is there any kind of a report that shows on average how these funds are used over all jurisdictions?
Great question. So there did not used to be, starting with the last year's, the fiscal year 13-14 report? No, 14-15. We asked them to start submitting the LSM auditing form that had the metrics. It's the spreadsheet that's the last page.
Oh, yes.
And so it has, before we just had them list what they spend and kind of what they spend it on. They'd put, repaving, Mount Diablo Boulevard. And that was all we got. But now we're asking for more detailed information, like the square footage of slurry seal or pavement, or the number of curb cuts, or the number of the linear feet of bike lanes, things like that. So we're now going to put together an annual report that details actually what was spent around the county.
And that's starting with 14-15?
Yes, and we just got our last report from that year, so I now have a full year's report, and we'll probably bring that to you at some point.
Okay, great. That would be great.
Sure. Thank you.
I appreciate that too, because reading through this packet, one particular city, I was confused as to what were they telling me. At one point I thought they were talking about their city, and then I thought, I must be looking at the wrong information here. I think I'm looking at the county-wide, and then it went back to the city. So that would be great to have that uniformed in that manner. Other comments? So I have a few. I'm not going to be here in February. I'll be attending the Marines Memorial retreat for Gold Star families, so I won't be here. Also, please note that there are several vacancies still that we have, and Diane did send an email out to the different municipalities that don't have a representative. If you know anyone in that particular area, we would appreciate that you contact Diane before you contact them and find out then what the protocol would be so that we can encourage a representative from their city. I too had the same question, Mike, as to what's going to be happening to our committee and our group, so I look forward to hearing more about as we go forward. I would like to see on the agenda, if this is possible, that at the end of the meeting that we have each representative come prepared with one topic about their particular city, what's actually happening in their city. So, I'm happy to talk about the roundabout and what I'm hearing from residents about the roundabout, but that's just, and of course, my pet topic is transportation, so I'd be happy to come back and get that. So I'd like for you to think about that, and it wouldn't be very long. It would be maybe about 5 minutes. Just, for example, Larry would let us know what's happening in the city of Pittsburgh, what highlights, what challenges or what accomplishments, so that I read about it in the newspaper, but I'd like to hear it firsthand. So I'd like you to think about that, and if that resonates with you, if you would please contact Diane and let her know, and we could put that as a topic on the agenda at the end of the meeting.
Yolanda, excuse me. I represent Contra Costa County. I couldn't begin to do a report on that. Would it be okay if I did really Far East County?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Such as Byron, Discovery Bay, that area.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. He's kidding. He's kidding.
More than we expected. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay. So seeing no other further. Okay, JP.
Yeah, just one other thing. I wondered if we might be able to request an update from the executive director. Maybe I think, I don't know if he's next time he's available to come and.
He's planning on being here soon. He's in Singapore on our February date, but he is committed to March.
Oh, good. Thank you, JP. I also would like to recommend for an agenda item to contact the group manager for eBART to give us an update on eBART and where he sees the project moving on. Hopefully, we're looking at phase 2, going out to Oakland. Seeing no other comments or questions, then I'd like to adjourn this meeting to February 22nd. Thank you.